First at 9 this Saturday, 3rd of January 2026. Chaos in Caracas. The United States strikes Venezuela. President Nicolas Maduro captured. Trump warns Iran not to harm protesters. Derana warns of chaos across the region. Reform tussle. School day cut to 7 periods of 45 minutes each. Trade unions outraged, says education sector marred by crisis. Quick fix. Amatale Dehibala pipeline ruptures disrupting water supply to many. NWSDB vows to restore stalled water supplies by midnight. Building back. 5 million rupee compensation for houses completely destroyed by Ditwa to be disbursed this month.
Kalin baby soap rupial 90කට. Kalin baby podi හැමෝටමයි.
This is Derana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening and welcome to First at 9 on the Derana News channel. I'm Aditya Durusingher joining you live with the latest in Sri Lanka and around the world, brought to you by the only Sri Lankan media network to rise to the pinnacle across all media platforms, recognized as the best by every survey and beloved by the people. And a top story tonight, we take you straight to Latin America, where the United States struck Venezuela and captured its long-serving president Nicolas Maduro today after months of pressuring him over accusations of drug running and illegitimacy in power. The United States has not made such a direct intervention into Latin America since the invasion of Panama in 1989 to depose military leader Manuel Noriega over similar allegations.
Several explosions were heard and low-flying aircraft swept through Venezuela's capital, Caracas, early today after US President Donald Trump ordered strikes on sites inside Venezuela, including military facilities and refineries. The first strike occurred around 1:50 a.m. local time. One of the largest fires caused by the strikes was seen near an airport in the southern area of Iguerote. The attacks follow a months-long pressure campaign by President Trump against the government of long-serving President Nicolas Maduro. During that period, the CIA carried out a drone strike on Venezuelan soil, while the US military seized 2 tankers carrying Venezuelan oil in international waters. However, this week, President Maduro said he was open to talks with the United States on combating drug trafficking and trading oil. Following the strikes, President Nicolas Maduro accused the United States of attacking civilian and military installations. The Venezuelan government declared a state of emergency and ordered all national defense plans to be implemented at the appropriate time and under the appropriate circumstances. Videos circulating on social media showed billowing smoke and sirens sounding across the country. Meanwhile, video footage showed US AH-64 Apache attack helicopters entering Caracas and destroying a key military installation, Fort Tuna, in the capital. Foreign media reported that large parts of Caracas were left without electricity and that a significant number of civilians were seen fleeing the area around Fort Tuna. Regional leaders reacted swiftly. Colombian President Gustavo Petro said his government rejects any unilateral military action that could aggravate the situation or put civilians at risk and called for a meeting of the United Nations Security Council. Cuban President Miguel Díaz-Canel demanded the reaction of the international community against the criminal attack by the United States on Venezuela. Russia's foreign ministry also condemned what it described as an act of US armed aggression, urging restraint and warning against further escalation. Iranian state media also reported that Iran, a key ally of Venezuela, has also condemned the US military attack. Amid the attacks, foreign media reported that the US Senate Armed Services Committee was not notified in advance of the military action. Officials of the Trump administration have not committed to informing congressional committees of the attack, though some lawmakers insist notification is required. Separately, the Federal Aviation Administration prohibited US aircraft from operating at all altitudes within Venezuelan airspace, citing safety risks due to ongoing military activity. Hours later, President Trump announced on Truth Social that the United States carried out a large-scale strike against Venezuela, claiming President Nicolas Maduro and his wife were captured and flown out of the country. In the meantime, Republican Senator Mike Lee said U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio told him that Maduro was arrested by U.S. forces and will stand trial in the United States. The senator further stated that U.S. Secretary of State anticipates no further action in Venezuela. The United States has not carried out such direct intervention in Latin America since the 1989 invasion of Panama to depose Panama's former military leader Manuel Noriega over similar allegations. In a separate development, President Trump warned Iran's authorities against killing peaceful protesters, saying Washington would come to their rescue. However, a senior advisor to Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei responded by warning Trump to be careful, citing potential chaos across the Middle East.
ඔබේ සම හඳුනාගෙන ඖෂධීය ශාකසාරමය forever face wash එකක් භාවිතා කරන්න.
Now taking your attention back to some local developments, the number of school periods, which currently stands at 8, will be reduced to 7 periods of 45 minutes each per day. This move by the Ministry of Education, along with several other proposed reforms, was subject to sharp criticism by trade unions who allege the lack of inclusive discourse on educational reforms.
Key directives on the proposed amendments to the school timetable were issued to the relevant authorities yesterday through a letter signed by Nalaka Kaluwewa, the Secretary to the Ministry of Education. The letter also carried several directives on the allocation of academic staff in schools across Sri Lanka. The letter also acknowledged the possible hardships students and other stakeholders may have to face as a direct consequence of the extension of school hours. The inconveniences acknowledged were particularly attributed to damage sustained by school and transport infrastructural facilities in the wake of Cyclone Ditwa. Considering these circumstances, school hours will remain from 7:30 a.m. to 1:30 p.m. as usual during the year. However, in a new development, Secretary Kaluwewa officially sanctioned the implementation of 7 periods per day, with each period spanning 45 minutes. This amendment to the school timetable will be effective for all grades from the 6th to the 13th. Secretary Kaluwewa also asserts that other reforms slated to be introduced to grades 1 and 6 will continue as previously planned. Meanwhile, trade unions of teachers and principals called a media briefing to share insights on the amendment of the school timetables and the overall scope of education reforms proposed by the incumbent government.
It was unnecessary for the NIE to shoulder responsibility. School periods per day have been brought down to 7. Students will miss 20 minutes of studying core subjects each week. We call for reforms within the Ministry of Education before education reforms are implemented. As soon as the module controversy erupted, they quickly resorted to CID assistance. There was no need to seek CID assistance. The names of those who compiled the modules are clearly listed here. They completely ignored holding these people accountable and rushed to the CID and elsewhere. Where did these people who lack capacity come from? They say these people have been in NPP education policy committees. Is this not ridiculous? We need educationists, not committee members. Intellectuals have shared their take on several other modules. If these expert interpretations had been available before, this discourse would have occurred earlier. Had that been the case, these shortcomings could have been resolved before implementation. They have created a crisis within the education sector.
අධ්‍යාපනය අර්බුදයක් නිර්මාණය කරලා තියෙනවා. එසා අපි වර්තමානයේ පැහැදිලිවම කියනවා.
Before education reforms are implemented on the 22nd, all stakeholders in the education sector must be summoned pursuant to the UNESCO Declaration on Education. We should discuss this matter collectively and then form a national policy. If the authorities continue to leave us out of these discussions, they will have to assume the responsibility of harm caused to students.
මේ දරුවන්ට වෙන අගතිය මොකක්ද කියන එකේ වගකීම බලධාරීන් දැරිය යුතු වෙනවා.
Now, the soon-to-be-implemented educational reforms were under the political spotlight today as well. Let's take a look at the latest political thoughts shared in that regard.
ආණ්ඩුවේ අධ්‍යාපන ප්‍රතිසංස්කරණ
The government seems to be reforming their education reforms daily. Trust is the foundational virtue that every reform demands. At the very outset, that trust was shattered. The situation right now suggests that the ministry under Dr. Harni Amarasuriya's direct purview does not have the strength to implement these reforms. Moreover, the ministry seems to have no agenda in place. They casually suggest the controversial pages to be torn off before distributing the books to students. If they do so, they will be tearing off the trust placed in them by the people to implement reforms for education in the future.
අධ්‍යාපන ප්‍රතිසංස්කරණ පිළිබඳව මිනිසුන්ගේ හිතේ තිබුණු විශ්වාස
අපි දන්නවා මේ අධ්‍යාපන ප්‍රතිසංස්කරණයන් සිද්ධ කරන එක.
Education reforms cannot be implemented in isolation overnight. It must be carried out under a comprehensive and collective effort. We are aware that social disclosure emerges when we go about transforming the country. Certain subjects of such social discourse are being duly probed at the moment. Thereafter, we will carry on with the reforms. We will never let the bankrupt opposition capitalize on the sensitive issue of education.
අපි අවස්ථාවක් දෙන්නේ නැහැ.
ආණ්ඩුවට අපි ප්‍රහාර එල්ල කරන්නවත්
We have no need to attack the government. The government's own actions seem to be biting them back. This government, which had no experience in statecraft and national administration, made securing power its sole objective. To that end, they sowed seeds of hatred and pointed out political incompetence elsewhere. A government that did all that now behaves childishly. Can the ministry, under the direct supervision of the Prime Minister, make such a blunder?
එහෙම වෙන්න පුළුවන්ද?
එයාලා ඉතින් එක එක අනාවැකි කියනවා.
They seem to be making a lot of predictions. However, we have proved all fortune tellers of the opposition false. They can no longer make any political predictions. The general public will take the necessary decision. People will decide the trajectory of the country and who should wield power. They have done so at the moment. I think politics of the yesteryears is dead. The people have progressed. If they hurl mud without appreciating these dynamics, they will be disappointed.
සොරිම තමයි කියලා තමයි කියන්න තියෙන්නේ.
අනාගත දරු පරම්පරාව
There is an attempt afoot to distort the minds of children. The government seems to be involved in this attempt either directly or indirectly, inadvertently or deliberately. There is an attempt to destroy Sri Lanka's culture through the education sector. We are against those efforts. The people will also rally against those efforts. The education sector should be reformed in a manner that suits the global job market. This is not the job market we anticipate.
අපි බලාපොරොත්තු වෙන රැකියාව වෙන්න පුළුවන් නම් ඕක නෙවෙයි.
Opposition leader Sajith Premadasa claims that educational reforms should be implemented in a manner that preserves the country's culture and civilizational values. He made these remarks while speaking at a religious ceremony today.
The ceremony to enshrine the sacred relics of the Sri Gautama Sambuddha Mahakachayana Mahasaya, currently under construction at the Sri Abhayarama Viharaya in Karampathara Matugama, was held today. Opposition leader Sajith Premadasa, Samaga Jana Balawegaya parliamentarian Jagat Vithana and former member of parliament Sanjeewa Edirimana were among those who took part in the ceremony.
අපේ අධ්‍යාපනය වෙනස් වෙන්නට ඕන.
It is essential that the existing education system be reformed. However, in carrying out changes to the free education system, care must be taken to protect our values, civility and cultural identity. The education reforms currently being implemented, however, appear to promote obscenity. We strongly condemn such actions. Who should be held accountable for the destruction of the free education system? At present, authorities are reportedly taking steps to remove certain pages from books that have already been printed prior to their distribution to schools. Many are deeply concerned as to whether this is a deliberately orchestrated conspiracy.
බොහෝ දෙනෙකුගේ සිත්වලට අවිල්ලා තියෙනවා.
Now, in other local developments, the National Water Supply and Drainage Board vows to restore water supply by midnight tonight to all areas affected by the sudden rupture of the pipeline running from Ambatale to Dehiwala. Authorities say the dilapidated condition of the 60-year-old pipeline caused the sudden rupture.
At around 10 p.m. last night, the main water transmission pipeline running from Ambatale to Dehiwala ruptured in Thalangama North, Battaramulla, completely inundating the road. The sudden pipeline rupture also led to the formation of a large pothole, causing damage to a vehicle parked in close proximity. As workers immediately initiated restoration efforts, officials of the National Water Supply and Drainage Board promptly arrived at the scene last night to inspect the work already underway. The sudden breakdown, however, disrupted water supply across several areas.
This water transmission line is at least 60 years old. This may have been the primary reason for the breakdown of the pipeline. Consequently, water supply to Moratua, Ravatavatta, Soisapura, Ratmalana, Mount Lavinia, Dehiwala, Vallavatta, Pamankada and Mulleriava were disrupted. Residents in Kolonnawa and Battaramulla are receiving water at reduced pressure. The restoration efforts commenced immediately after the pipeline burst. To mitigate the adverse repercussions, water bowsers were dispatched to hospitals and other essential service institutions.
The NWSTB reveals that water supply can be restored by midnight tonight as restoration nears completion.
Now, the Minister of Transport, Highways and Urban Development, Bimal Ratnayaka, reveals that the disbursement of 5 million rupees in compensation to all families whose homes were destroyed completely by Cyclone Ditwa will commence within the first week of January. However, residents and farmers in several disaster-struck areas claim that they are yet to receive sufficient compensation for the losses they have incurred to date.
Residents of Mahaman Kadavala village allege that they are yet to receive 25,000 rupees in compensation for homes damaged by flooding caused by the overflow of the Mahaman Kadavala tank. According to villagers, more than 150 houses were inundated by Ditwa-triggered floodwaters. The residents further pointed out that political committee interventions have hindered the compensation process. Meanwhile, farmers preparing for the Maha season report severe difficulties after floodwaters deposited large amounts of sand across fields. Over 100 acres of farmland in the Dehiyatakandi and Palpitigama remained affected by the overflow of River Mahavali. However, farmers state that despite more than a month having passed since floods subsided, sufficient compensation for crop damage has still not been provided. Meanwhile, speaking at the reopening of the Akmimana Kesalgasthena Ambagavila Road, undertaken at a cost of 72 million rupees, Minister of Transport, Highways and Urban Development Bimal Ratnayaka disclosed that measures are in place to grant compensation amounting to 5 million rupees to individuals who lost their residences due to the disaster. He added that payments will be made within the first 10 days of January.
This is the first time a government has introduced such a wide-ranging program to restore the livelihoods of people affected by a disaster. I'm not referring only to compensation. Within a month, nearly 99% of the damaged infrastructure has already been restored. From the 1st of January onwards, steps were taken to relocate those with damaged homes into rented houses. They cannot continue living in relief centres indefinitely. Under this arrangement, a maximum of 75,000 rupees will be provided each month. This includes 25,000 rupees for rent and 50,000 rupees to cover monthly living expenses. The government's main objective is to help families whose houses were completely destroyed to build new homes. Accordingly, measures are in place to provide compensation of 5 million rupees within the first 10 days of this month. This process will begin in the areas most severely affected, including Anuradhapura and Kurunegala. Sarvajana Senehasa, an initiative led by the Sarvajana Balaya, continues to power renovations of disaster-struck temples across Kandy. Sarvajana Balaya leader MP Dilith Jayavira visited the Sri Rajopanaramiya temple in Gatabe today to seek New Year blessings and to also inspect the ongoing renovations of disaster-struck temples in Kandy.
Leader of Sarvajana Balaya, MP Dilith Jayavira visited the Sri Rajopanaramiya temple in Gatame, Peradeniya this morning and received blessings from the chief incumbent, Most Venerable Kappitiyagoda Sirivimala Thera. Meanwhile, representatives of Sarvajana Balaya, along with its leader Dilith Jayavira, visited several areas in Kandy to inspect a number of temples being renovated under the Sarvajana Senehasa initiative. The foundation stone for the construction of the Siri Siddharth Mahavihara in Kalugamua, Peradeniya was also laid. In a separate visit, Sarvajana Balaya leader MP Dilith Jayavira visited the Buddhist center in Kirapana Gampola. During the visit, Jayavira donated paint in view of the renovation work about to commence under the Sarvajana Senehasa initiative.
In other news, the GovPay platform will be implemented across all provinces of Sri Lanka by the 15th of this month. Deputy Inspector General of Police in charge of Traffic Management and Road Safety, WPJ Senadira, notes that the traffic offenders will no longer need to bribe police officers to swiftly settle minor traffic violations. The GovPay online platform has been implemented across 7 provinces. This platform will be implemented across the rest of the provinces by the 15th of January. If a driver violates any of the 33 traffic offences mentioned in the fine sheet, payment of fines can be settled online hassle-free. No one can allege the lack of access to this platform. Necessary support hotlines have already been introduced. There is no need to waste time when paying fines. Many drivers try to settle fines using other means with police officers and often end up in quarrels. Soliciting and accepting bribes are both punishable offences. If any officer is found guilty of soliciting bribes, the Inspector General of Police will take strict action pursuant to criminal law. Now there is no reason to bribe officers. Drivers are able to make all payments online. All officers attached to police motor traffic divisions have been appraised of the needful. Police officers will not have to face allegations of soliciting bribes moving forward. The Manusat Derana relief operations continue to provide school supplies for children affected by recent disasters across the country. Recently, Manusat Derana distributed school supplies to affected students of Gamini Central College in Ingiriya. Meanwhile, school supplies were also provided to children of the Laggala Mahavidyalaya. Welcome back. Now, despite the severe impact of Cyclone Detwa, the latest statistics indicate that Sri Lanka achieved notable economic gains in 2025 as the country continued its recovery from the economic crisis. This performance reflects a gradual but broad-based stabilization under the IMF-supported reform program, with improvements across fiscal, external and financial indicators.
With the support of the International Monetary Fund, Sri Lanka entered 2025 with the objective of restoring economic stability following the country's recent economic crisis. Accordingly, tax revenue, the main component of state income, recorded a historic performance during the year. After 93 years, the Inland Revenue Department collected 2.2 trillion rupees in 2025, the highest revenue figure in its history. The department stated that this represents a surplus of 33 billion rupees over the annual target, as well as a 15% increase compared to 2024. According to the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, total government revenue earned in the first 11 months of 2025, including tax revenue, non-tax revenue and grants, amounted to 4.96 trillion rupees, marking a 35% increase compared to the corresponding period in 2024. The CBSL further noted that the primary account surplus, which stood at 928 billion rupees in the first 11 months of 2024, rose to 1.94 trillion rupees during the same period in 2025. Meanwhile, exports were $12.4 billion and imports amounting to $19.3 billion were recorded in the first 11 months of 2025, resulting in a trade deficit of $6.9 billion. Worker remittances totaled $7.19 billion during the first 11 months of 2025, reflecting a 21% increase compared to the same period last year. The country's gross official reserves, including the swap facility with the People's Bank of China, stood at $6 billion at the end of November 2025. According to the latest figures released by the Sri Lanka Tourism Development Authority, 2,344,978 tourists had visited the country as of December 29, 2025. As a result, 2025 has been recorded as the year with the highest number of tourist arrivals in Sri Lanka's history. The CBSL also reported that tourism earnings reached $2.91 billion in the first 11 months of 2025. The Colombo Stock Exchange also recorded new milestones in 2025, reflecting strong investor confidence from both local and foreign participants. The All Share Price Index reached a historic high of 23,659.7, while market turnover surpassed the 1.2 trillion rupees mark for the first time. Market capitalization also exceeded 8 trillion rupees for the first time in history. Foreign investor participation in market transactions in 2025 stood at 6.2%.
Now, in some international business news, China's BYD has overtaken Elon Musk's Tesla as the world's biggest seller of electric vehicles, marking the first time it has outpaced its American rival in annual sales. Tesla car sales dropped by nearly 9% in 2025 to 1.64 million vehicles sold worldwide, the carmaker said yesterday, its second consecutive year of falling car deliveries.
Tesla ceded its crown as the world's top electric vehicle maker to China's BYD after annual sales fell for a second year, hit by rising competition, the expiry of US tax credits and brand backlash. With global EV sales rising 28% last year, BYD outsold Tesla for the first time on an annual basis, helped by rapid growth in Europe, where the Chinese automaker has been widening its lead over the US rival. Tesla, whose sales fell about 8.6% in 2025, is facing intense competition, especially in Europe, raising questions about its ability to revive the core auto business as CEO Elon Musk steers the company towards robotaxis and humanoid robots. Shares of the company fell about 2% in afternoon trading. The Chinese automaker's electric vehicle sales surpassed Tesla's after years of narrowing the gap. Tesla's fourth quarter figures come after third quarter deliveries were supported by a rush to lock in $7,500 in federal tax credits after President Donald Trump's administration decided to pull the plug on the incentive in September. In the US, EVs accounted for 6.2% of retail vehicle sales in the quarter, down 3.6 percentage points from a year earlier, while average transaction prices rose nearly $6,000 to $53,300 according to JD Power data. Tesla said it delivered 418,227 vehicles in the October-December quarter, down 15.6% from 495,570 a year earlier. Analysts expected 434,487 vehicles, or a 12.3% drop, according to financial data platform Visible Alpha. For the full year, Tesla delivered 1.64 million vehicles, compared with 1.79 million in 2024. Analysts polled by Visible Alpha had expected deliveries of about 1.65 million vehicles.
Welcome back. Now in your world news, Saudi Arabia has welcomed a request by Yemen's Presidential Leadership Council to host a forum in Riyadh aimed at resolving escalating tensions in the country's south. In a statement issued today, the Saudi Foreign Ministry called on the southern Yemeni factions to participate in talks in the Saudi capital to develop what it described as fair and comprehensive solutions to the southern issue. Meanwhile, the United Arab Emirates expressed deep concern of the ongoing escalation, urging Yemeni parties to exercise restraint and prioritize stability while denying allegations that it is backing southern separatist forces. Earlier today, Presidential Leadership Council Chairman Rashad Al-Alimi appealed to the political groups and figures in southern Yemen to attend the Riyadh Forum, stressing the centrality of the southern cause and rejecting unilateral solutions. This comes amid deadly clashes following a major offensive by the Southern Transitional Council in two southern provinces, including oil-rich Hadramaut, a region of strategic and historical importance to Saudi Arabia. That's all for tonight from First and 9. For the latest developments around the clock, stay in touch with Ada Derana, the Sri Lankan brand of international excellence. Thank you for joining. Have a great night.
From across the nation and around the world, this is Sri Lanka's #1 news source, Ada Derana.